explosion of Haitian migrants in the span of only 3 years, it's affected almost every single person in and around the area. And so there's so many people who want to talk and raise their concerns because they feel like their concerns with the not only the city commission but also Clark County, where Springfield is located in, they feel like their concerns aren't being heard. So this past week, I met with some locals and business owners. And the locals, they feel like they have a little bit more leeway to speak out about the problems because the business owners told me that they're actually concerned about criticizing the way the city has been handling this crisis because they feel like if they speak out about it, then the city is going to retaliate them in so many ways that a city can go after a private business. And that was really concerning to hear because, Jill, what I told you this week, and it remains true, that the bigger story seems to be the fact that the city and the county is doing everything in its power to quash any negative story, any negative news about the Haitians being in the city because they want to be able to be seen as a desired destination for Haitians. And in fact, I've heard stories about Haitians who have been living in Florida being told by their friends and family who had gone to Springfield to go up there because there's a lot more opportunities to take advantage of. And as I've been documenting, it's come at the cost of the U.S. citizens and the taxpayers in that town.
Julio, give us a little bit more information about the kind of retaliation the businesses are worried about. And I mean, what are the kinds of issues that, they're concerned with, first off, in specific detail? And then, how are they worried about being retaliated against? What would happen to them?
So their concerns have been kind of what the general population has been concerned about. But at places of business, people, Haitians, have been tending to gather at different strip malls, different areas of businesses. They've also, some Haitians have been able to open up a certain number of businesses right next door to the already established businesses that Americans have had for a while. And so there's been loitering issues. I was told that a Haitian drove a car straight through an empty building that was right next to an occupied running business. And that business subsequently closed down not too long after the Haitians had moved in, and it was kind of causing all these problems. In terms of the retaliation, they alluded to, just using the city using any of its oversight power and using it using it in a bad faith way, whether it comes to inspections, whether it comes to making sure that they're up to date on the codes, which is kind of ironic because the housing occupancy codes, as I've said before, those aren't being enforced. Because I think the city has basically kind of made a devil's bargain where, if we don't have these Haitians 10, 15 to a room in a 3-story house, then we're going to have a housing crisis. But the problem is there already is a housing crisis, but it's not the Haitians who are facing it. It's the American citizens. And there was actually a homeless advocate at Tuesday's meeting who said as such. He said, I don't know a single Haitian that's homeless, but I can give you a whole bunch of lists of Americans who've been pushed out of their homes. And so the city just seems to be, they seem to have made initial decisions that they thought would keep the Haitians keep the Haitians content, but because that doesn't solve the long-term problems, and as more Haitians keep coming into the city, those issues are just compounded over time. And it seems like that they have now kind of dug their own grave because now not only do they run risk of making the Haitians upset, but they've already made the taxpayers and the people that, their budget is 82% is from income tax. So they've angered a large portion of that base. And that's why every single time someone moves away from the city, that is very significant on their ability to be able to run services because they need those funds.
So, Julio, let's dive into the city of Springfield, right? You're saying that they're trying to make sure that the news stories don't get out and that everything looks fine because they want more of the Haitian migrants to come there. But how is the city responding to all of this attention that is now on them?
They're not. So the first day that I got, the first full day that I was there for, which was Tuesday, as journalists do, I reached out to the city to see if they had a statement about not towing unlicensed drivers' cars, namely Haitians. I was directed to the city manager's office, where the strategic engagement director. They said go to her. I called. I got through to somebody, and they said they weren't willing to give out a statement. I have been unable to get through to anybody since Tuesday. They let it go to voicemail, and I've called different times throughout the business day, mind you. They let it go to voicemail, and lo and behold, the voicemail box is full. It seems like they've been very selective of what they're willing to respond to. Obviously, they have been at the forefront of saying, well, the pets, we've seen no credible reports about pets, but they haven't really seemed to be addressing the ducks and the geese. I was told by locals that they had 2 swans at Snyder Park, which is the park in question, and those swans are gone. And so the city really hasn't really addressed that. The police department, when I asked them about the whole driver's license and car towing issue, they said, well, we're not giving out any statements. But that's not true, because they also gave out a statement about, well, we hadn't heard any reports about the whole pet issue. So it seems that they are willing to say things that they can kind of put a tamper down on, like the worst aspects of it. But there's so many other issues besides just the local wildlife, that they're really not willing to at least to reporters, or friendly reporters, I guess, they're not willing to give out any information just at all.
Julio, when we had you on the program earlier this week, you told us that some of the locals were afraid to speak out because they didn't want to be called racists, right? And have you seen that as you've gone throughout the week, that's one of the undertones of the story that as it continues to progress?
Absolutely. And the reason why is because of it's not necessarily the local dynamics, although obviously that plays a big part because it is a smaller town and it's people know people. But because of the national attention that's been brought to the city, people understand that if they end up in a viral video that goes into the stratosphere and it gets onto the left side of the media, they feel like they can be targeted by activists, by the national media, by national politicians, and point to them and say, see, that's an example of the extreme MAGA movement, and this is just all bigoted nonsense, and therefore you should ignore it. But before I left, I was given quite literally a treasure trove of documents that I'm still going through. But from what I have is pretty damning on not only the health of the community, but also the money that's being spent by the city. And I'm hoping to, dot my T's and cross my I's about the finer points of details, because I think it shows that, again, there's kind of just the typical local government incompetence and corruption that has been made worse and is now going to potentially be in the national spotlight because of the influx of Haitians.
We love the sound of a treasure trove of documents that you took with you from Springfield, Ohio, and look forward to working on that next week. Thanks so much for joining us, Julio.
Thank you.
Democrats claim that everything is fine in Springfield, and Chris Bedford will expose who their source is coming up. We know that this economy is not what everybody is hoping for, and healthcare costs, they're completely out of control. And government, well, that's never going to be the answer. So where can you turn? Well, take a look at Lassie Health. That's Laasy. Lassie Health, they're not health insurance, but it is the access to the healthcare that you want without all the red tape, the restrictions, the inflated costs. Because coverage for them starts at just $30 a month. And with that, you can have the transparent pricing, the comprehensive tailored coverage for your needs, and the access to the healthcare services you want without breaking the bank. And there's no annual or lifetime cap on the services, and there's no open enrollment that you have to wait for. You can start a plan at any time. So what are you going to get with this? Well, you can have over 400 prescription medications for free, free unlimited virtual mental health care counseling, and free 24/7 virtual urgent care, lab tests, image tests, procedures, so much discounts off of all of those because Lassie Health is a game changer. So check out the affordable plans that put you in control of your health care at healthylink.com/blaze. And for a limited time, you get your first month free, up to $100 off eligible plans. So get healthy, be healthy, and stay healthy without breaking the bank at healthylink.com/blaze. Even though some locals have reported otherwise, Springfield officials are saying that they haven't received any official reports of migrants eating cats and dogs. But in his recent piece for Blaze Media, Chris Bedford shed some doubt on those claims. And Chris joins us now. So, I mean, come on. Why aren't you buying what the officials are telling us in Springfield, Ohio?
Did you watch the video that the city manager put out? The city manager is this position. It's not an elected position, but it is appointed by the elected council. And the elected council, he serves at their discretion, but they can't tell him what to do. But he kind of knows what to do, and he knows who butters his bread. So if you see this video where he's explaining how Springfield has changed with the influx of 20,000 refugees who are on the government dole from a voodoo island, he talks about the incredible diversity and the wonderful character of Springfield, Ohio, which I'm sure is true. And he talks also about the economy there and the diverse industrialization and the wonderful commercial opportunities. And he tries to make some side references to a little bit of misinformation about our town, that there are roving bands of migrants who are threatening residents, who are eating animals, when they're not supposed to. And he doesn't want to talk about it. And it makes sense because this is his job. Now, a reporter's job is to listen to this person and say, okay, that's interesting, but it sounds like the senator from Ohio, J.D. Vance, his office says it's been getting calls from residents about missing pets. We've had people coming into town halls talking about birds being murdered in local parks or taken away to be eaten. So maybe there's something more than the city manager. And it just reminds me, this guy's been used for fact check after fact check. The former president was fact checked on it. CNN, when J.D. Vance went on for the post-debate interview, basically repeated the city manager denies this as if it was a bead of the rosary and it was a special prayer that they had to try and keep the reality of this situation away. And it's extremely embarrassing. Any reporter who's ever done any of this, both of you, all of us, we know that when we call a politician and they say there's nothing to see here, well, maybe pull back the curtain a little bit and take a look.
I mean, yeah, you said this in your piece that, we've all dealt with this also personally outside of our jobs where, you go in DC and the city councilman tells you there's no crime here, nothing to see here. Unbelievable stuff. And I don't know anyone who has ever dealt with a city who would just take what the city manager said. Like, his job is to cover this stuff up. You're so right about this. But let's move on. We got two things to go over here. At the rally in Tucson, Arizona, President Trump revealed another policy proposal, a new one, eliminating taxes on overtime pay. What do we think about that? Is that an issue that Trump should be focusing on? Is this a good idea?
I think it is. I mean, the people who are taxed the most on overtime pay are those people who are working the hardest, who take those extra hours, who work those holidays, who are away from their family, who are out late at night. The Republican Party is extremely uneasy with this stuff. And I guess, you got to take a look. There's a lot of rich guys out there right now saying, well, I think I'll take the first half of my paycheck in overtime pay and the second half in tips. You have to be careful about this sort of thing. But this is the kind of inventive thinking, the actually populist thinking. A lot of the GOP in D.C. is very content to take the working class's vote and then to go back to D.C. and just continue as absolutely as normal. Sign another tax break for offshoring. Sign another protection for corporations, why they should be treated differently from family businesses. Go after this, go after that. And very few people are actually doing the legwork to say, what are the policies that we can pursue that make the working class rise to the middle class? What are the policies that we can do to make the middle class stay in the middle class? I mean, honestly, the income tax is awful. The any kind of a tax on your labor when you don't tax money the same way doesn't seem to make sense to me, at least. I don't want to get too philosophical here, but at least once you've worked 40 hours of your week, can you work the rest of that time for your family, the time that you're taking away from your family, as opposed for the government? Well, maybe that'd be nice, but I know they need to raise all this money so they can pay the Haitians to be in Springfield.
That they do. You know it's true. Let's jump over to Georgia now, Chris, because in Fulton County, the judge dismissed 2 criminal counts against Donald Trump for the election interference. Now, the judge dropped the charges because he ruled that the state prosecutors didn't have the proper authority to bring them forward. So we hear all of these cases going back and forth, and now these charges are dropped. Is any of this going to have any impact in November?
No. The only impact it's had has had the reverse impact of what Democrats hoped for. I mean, I think the American people are, when Donald Trump, remember, when he first became president and the FBI announced investigations, everybody took it seriously. Republican voters held their breath and said, I hope there's not something bad here. Jeff Sessions stepped aside and said, you're right. You guys must have the right idea about this. I'll recuse myself. And they were naive. And by the end of his term, when Mar-a-Lago was getting raided after he'd left office, you had senators who generally are pretty careful, like Marco Rubio, recording videos on their back porch saying, this is an overstep. The federal government has gone out of line. Law enforcement and the courts are trying to penalize the president. This is insane. And by the time these trials ran around, Democrats were really hoping that they would be able to take down their biggest competition for the White House legally, to show the American people that this guy was actually really bad and that their lives had not been much better 4 years before. And almost immediately it backfired. But all of these cases were politicized, so they were rushed, and the facts weren't there. The authority wasn't there. So they've gotten some political talking points to preach to their choir, and other liberals nod up and down and say he's a bad man. But thank goodness the American justice system in some ways can be vindicated by aspects of this, where the checks and balances that don't often exist in D.C. have actually been putting an end to Fani Willis's ridiculous cases, the New York cases, Jack Smith's cases. They're just not panning out the way Democrats hoped.
Bedford, I didn't know you were a cat guy. This explains the beginning of our segment. We can see your cat back there on the floor.
Hopefully it's the gray one.
It is.
It's like a dog cat. He goes for walks for us. He lives outside.
Name. I need a name. What's the cat's name?
Buster.
There we go. Buster the cat. That's how we're going to end the Friday with Chris Bedford, with Buster the cat. Thanks so much, Chris.
I'll see you Monday.
Red states might have prevented the 2020 election from happening again. We'll explain just ahead. You don't have to wait until November to vote. You can vote with your dollar every single day. GoodRanchers.com, you can make a powerful choice to vote for American meat, to support American agriculture, and to make your voice heard for transparency in our food. Good Ranchers sources all of their meat exclusively from American farms, which not only supports local ranchers, but also ensures that you receive high-quality American-raised meat with no antibiotics, no added hormones or seed oils ever. And by shopping at GoodRanchers.com, you're making a statement about the kind of values that you stand for, the hard work, the dedication to the American tradition. And right now, Good Ranchers is having a presidential promo. So for a limited time, you can get a free add-on for a whole 4 years, which is good until the next election. And that means that when you subscribe to any of their boxes, you get to decide if you want extra plain chicken breast, Angus ground beef, Applewood smoked bacon, or wild-caught salmon in every order for 4 years. Now, it's the perfect way to ensure that you have high-quality American meat in your kitchen. Every cut is pre-trimmed, individually packed, and vacuum sealed, which honestly makes your life easier. So there's no more messy meal prep. There's no wasted food because of freezer burn or poor storage packaging. Good Ranchers helps you get the most flavor and value out of every ounce of meat that you buy. And in this economy, that matters more and more each day. So don't miss out. Use my code Jill to claim this presidential promo worth over $1,200 and claim $25 off your first box plus free shipping, and bring 100% American meat to your family meals, good until 2028. That's GoodRanchers.com, code Jill. GoodRanchers.com, American meat delivered. November 5th is quickly approaching, and many right-leaning voters are having flashbacks of shady white vans and pipes bursting in the middle of the night, or hearing all about Maricopa County. A recent article on theblaze.com details some of the election integrity victories that have occurred in swing states since the 2020 election, and that will hopefully prevent any of these shenanigans from going on once again. Now we have the author of that piece. She's the senior editor for Blaze News, Cortney Weil. So Cortney, let's start with Wisconsin, right? Back in 2020, the county clerks were legally permitted to make minor changes to the information on the envelope, something like filling in missing or incomplete addresses for the absentee ballots to prevent them from being rejected. So in 2024, this time around, what can they do for the ballots, or what can the county clerks, what are they not allowed to do this time around?
Yeah, it's been a really important change. So as you said, in 2020, they were able to make these minor adjustments to the information on the ballot, but now county clerks will not be able to interfere with the information that voters write on the outside of absentee ballots, on the envelopes. If time permits, a county clerk may send the ballot back to the voter if there are maybe some missing information, but the county clerk cannot put that down him or herself. Another change that has come about was described to me as revoting. And what was happening is that people were casting a ballot via absentee ballot, and then all of a sudden they had a change of heart a day or 2 or 3 days later, and they were able to go into their county clerk's office, ask the clerk to destroy their ballot so that they could cast a new one. Well, now that's no longer going to be the case. Voters who have a change of heart, it was explained to me perhaps by some influence from some activists or some ballot harvesters, they won't be able to change their vote. Once it's cast, it's cast. So that's an exciting update.
Cortney, we thank you for writing this article. I think it's going to be something that a lot of people read over the course of the next couple of months when they look to see what has changed and what hasn't. It's a question on everyone's mind. So we talk about this all the time on this program and at the website. And again, if you haven't seen it, it's Blaze News Investigates the Dems election shenanigans facing death by 1,000 cuts. Another one of those cuts is in New Hampshire. Can you tell us what has changed in New Hampshire since 2020?
Yeah, New Hampshire's a really interesting case because it's actually one of a couple dozen states that offers what's called same-day registration, that voters can walk in and register on the same day as Election Day. And in the past, voters were able to walk in and just sign under penalty of perjury that they were who they said they were and they lived where they said they lived. They did not have to provide any verifying documentation. Now that has changed. Now, if they want to register on the same day, they actually have to furnish the officials with their documentation. They may go and cast what's called an affidavit ballot if they don't happen to have their ID with them at the time. And then they will have up to 7 days to send copies of those documents to the Secretary of State's office. And in fact, they'll even receive a self-addressed stamped envelope already prepaid to help facilitate that process. So there's really no excuse. If they don't get that within 7 days, their ballot will not be counted.
Now, I remember, Cortney, Nevada back in 2020, there was so much talk around that state. So what have they done there since 2020?
That one's really an exciting point because Nevada actually sends a live ballot to every single one of their active registered voters. And what had happened in Clark County, that's the county where Las Vegas is located, they had recently gone through and cleaned up their voter rolls and actually removed almost 100,000 names from their voter rolls. And if they hadn't done that, then we would have potentially had up to 100,000 live ballots sent to no known recipient and just been floating around. And that's really important in Clark County because it not only is it the most populous state in Nevada, but it's also the most Democratic and by a wide margin. So this is a really important update.
Cortney, can you tell us how many of these rules are going to be in place in time for 2024? And what do you think the overall impact will be of these changes?
That one is difficult to pin down, Matthew. And that's because it's a very fluid situation. In fact, when I wrote the article and by the time I had passed it over to our editors, the Commonwealth Court in Pennsylvania had already intervened and blocked enforcement on one of the rules that I had written about. So this remains a very fluid situation. I do anticipate that particular measure, which deals with having correct dates on absentee ballots in Pennsylvania, I do anticipate that the state Supreme Court will take a look at that and make a final determination before Election Day. But it's difficult to say which will be enforced and which won't. But at least we're fighting, and that means the Democrats are having to fight too.
Yeah, Cortney, I truly believe this is one of the most important stories of 2024. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Is there any value in art that's generated by AI? James Poulos will answer this philosophical question when we return. Is art made by machines really art? Given the recent rise of AI images, it's a fair question to ask, and it is one that is asked by our own Blaze TV host, James Poulos, and he joins us now because, James is the biggest lover of AI that we have on the entire network. No, he certainly is not. But let's get into this. Can electronically generated art still be called art?
There we go. There's a lot of debate right now over whether AI, AGI is even the right word for these things. I like to call them automated simulators. And if you look at it that way, they're simulating art. And that's okay. We simulate lots of different things. And as long as we don't get confused between what the original or what the real thing is and what the simulation is, I think it'll make our lives a lot easier.
Yeah, so how do we not get confused? Because it certainly seems like a lot of people maybe are. And as you say in this article, we've gotten to the place where, as you cite the old U2 song, people think the fake thing is even better than the real thing. And we're losing the real thing. We're losing reality in the midst of this. I think a lot of us feel that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, look, a lot of people are looking for escape right now. They don't understand what's happening to them. They don't want to accept what they know is happening to them. And where do you go for relief? I mean, I think the reality is that, even for Americans who do have a pretty clear idea of what's going on and understand that we got some tough choices ahead about what to do, they still tend to process the world around them through screens, big screens, small screens, in the middle screens, TV, phone, movies. There's still a lot of action there. That's where a lot of the content is, and that's kind of where Americans are accustomed to working out kind of the experience of everyday life in a kind of sort of mirror that they can check in on themselves with. And so I think, I think movies, I think television, these things are going to continue to exist. And I think in some ways it's even more important that these are places where people can go to see real human beings. And where they can see the human experience elevated into what art is supposed to do, which is really prepare our souls to accept our mortality and to live well in preparation for our death. That's a tall order, but that's kind of what art's all about. You can go back to one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, Andrei Tarkovsky, who laid that all out. And, whenever the spirit is moving between souls and that kind of artistic communication is going on between artist and audience, that is a loop that does not need to have machines in it. Although, you go back to some other filmmakers like Bresson, one of the great old French filmmakers, he said, the camera sees things that human beings can't necessarily see. Even the director doesn't know it's there until after the fact. So you can incorporate some kinds of machinery into this process, but you can't replace the human beings only with machines. Then you just have this kind of robot snake eating its tail. And look, we can get rid of all human beings right now if we wanted to. We could wipe ourselves out. And end of story. If you read the Bible, that's not what actually is going to happen. So you can look at that as a silver lining in all this. But we do have the power to snuff ourselves out. We can commit suicide right now. I don't recommend it, no matter how bad things get. And I think we should apply that same principle to all the things we do in culture. We don't need to take ourselves out of the equation. So why do it?
So it sounds like what you're saying is we're particularly susceptible to misusing AI when it comes to art because our understanding of art is pretty hollow, right? I mean, you're saying art is ultimately about preparing the soul for death and becoming more virtuous here. I mean, that's pretty lofty stuff when I look around the cultural landscape, right? It certainly is deep and old and seems true in some way. But it sounds like you're saying we don't understand what art is, and therefore we misuse or look for too much in AI. Is that accurate?
Yeah, if we don't understand even what we are as human beings, how are we supposed to understand the nature of what it is that we do? We have to take responsibility for who we are and what it is that we're doing here in the first place. If you just keep turning to technology, look, we tried to outsource all this stuff, all these important decisions to the intellectuals, to the academics, to the bureaucrats. Oh, we're too stupid. Oh, we're just hobbits. We just want to grill. Please figure it all out for us. Finance, everything. Just let the elites figure it out. They're smarter than us. They're the experts. They'll get it done. And guess what? In a lot of ways, we're worse off than ever. So if you take that principle and apply it to the machines, whether it's AI or algorithms or code, we've already tried the experiment of outsourcing all of our responsibilities for sorting our own stuff out to the quote unquote super intelligent. It didn't work with human beings, and it's going to create even more of the worst problems applying that same principle to so-called super smart machines.
James, one of the continuing stories of this week is Springfield, Ohio. And that's because, mainly, I think the cat memes have really kept this thing going. So on Return, which you can find at theblaze.com, they had an article that had the 8 funniest memes of the Haitian migrants eating pets. So I have to ask you, are the cat memes considered art?
Well, look, they were created by human beings. Most of them, as far as I know. I don't think any of the ones that made the cut were made entirely by machines. And so you got to think, if there's an artist, then there must be art in some way, shape, or form. You can blow this out to weird proportions. We've, far too many years were spent sort of debating whether or not graffiti, street art, does it really count as art? You go into art museums, you look at all this weird stuff, things that pass as art now. Just you can pour a pile of charcoal briquettes on the floor of an empty white room and put a little flaming bag of dog poop on top, and some people call that art. These debates have always been around, and I think taking our eye off of the question of these moronic debates and actually finding out how we can share our humanity in our own lives with those who are around us in flesh and blood, through whether it's through language communication, visual communication. I mean, look, this is what church attendance has been all about for a long time. Is here's a place where you can go and you can spiritually commune with your fellow man in an area that has art in it that is transcendent and that reconnects us to our spiritual nature and our spiritual life. You can have all kinds of art that fails that test, that really makes us demoralized, confused about who we are. Really, evil art. It's still art.
So just to put a fine point on it, I mean, when it comes to AI generation of images, memes, things like this week, which many people are engaging in increasing numbers. I think every week that goes by, people push the little button on X. It's called Grok there, the AI, and they start messing with this. Immediately, they start trying to create, better and better images, or the images that they want. Do you have any thoughts about that, though, because people are asking this question? In one way, you could say it's just a tool. It's like using a paintbrush, right? We've always used tools to create art, and some tools are more direct and some are more obtuse. I mean, how do you look at that? Do you see it as just another tool?
Well, it is at least that, but it's also a lot more. The big difference to me is, look, you see people out there, they're using the technology, and as a result, many are worried that, just going off of the old Turing test, which is sort of this ridiculous idea that if a computer can confuse a person into not knowing whether they're talking to a human or computer, then that's proof that the computer is like really intelligent, which, why is deception the standard for intelligence? That's creepy right off the bat. But people are worried that, the machines are going to imitate the humans and then humans are going to become confused. Well, okay, you want to worry about that? Go right ahead. What I'm worried about beyond that, though, and what I think a discerning person should focus their attention more on, is people starting to want to imitate their machines. I saw a trailer for the latest, greatest, I don't know, we'll see, remake of Salem's Lot, a new Salem's Lot film. They did one, I think, just last year, and they're doing it again. I mean, this is really scraping the bottom of the barrel of the IP bucket out in Hollywood. But some of the stills, I sort of paused the trailer and I was looking at this thing. And it really looked like it was computer-generated art. That kind of hyper-realistic thing where everything's glossy and it's got reflections in like 4 or 5 different primary colors and kind of oversaturated and really slick and shiny. AI art looks a lot like that. There's something that still just doesn't really feel real about it. And to see human beings trying to capture that vibe in a film that is full of human actors, human cast, human production, human cinematography, that really gave me pause. You worry about machines imitating human beings, that makes sense. It's kind of commonsensical, but I think what we really need to look out for is how do we help people understand that they should not themselves be imitating the machines.
Well, James, I can draw some mean stick figures if you need some help, because I see some empty shelves behind you. Maybe we need to print out some of the Matthew Peterson cat memes with Donald Trump and get those for you in your new place down there. Thanks so much for joining us. Space. Yeah, there's plenty of space. Thanks, James.
I disavow creating any memes. But I did, and I think James just called it art. Maybe
that's right. You were an artist now. Forget editor-in-chief title. You're just going to be artist.
Come on,
Matthew Peterson.
Come on down to the Blaze.
We had Sabo on yesterday, and now we have Matthew Peterson here. I don't know which is the better artist. I don't know anymore.
Yeah, I think the deeper point there that needs to be said over and over again is what he's saying about the true purpose of art. Preparing you for death and making you think the uncomfortable thoughts. I know that sounds terrible, but that is making you think seriously about your life and reevaluating it in some way that just inspires awe and real trembling. I mean, that's something that almost seems laughable in today's environment, but it's real. It's very real, and it's something that we need to recapture.
I love the way that James thinks. It's always a unique perspective. When we come back, though, if you want to just go ahead and dive into your weekend and watch some great movies, well, we have plenty of Westerns for you to choose from. Stay tuned. It's Friday and we're in a movie mood. Now, Westerns are classics and they have stood the test of time. But why? Blaze writer Kevin Ryan joins us now to discuss. So, Kevin, let's start big picture overall. What makes it a Western?
So a Western, strictly speaking, involves this time period during the American frontier before the open range became closed, the last bit of free America, so to speak. And it's an artistic re-envisioning of a time when, in my opinion, things were a little bit easier. So one of my motivations with Wednesday Western is to look at this art form and say, how can we learn from this art form before abandoning it? Because there's always a story about the Western's dead and all that. My perspective is it's not dead, and we can keep learning from it.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because it is true. Every 5 years or so, you'll see an article that says, you know what, Hollywood is getting rid of the Western has died. And then it's usually in the context of announcing a new movie that's a Western. I mean, Kevin Costner just put a bunch of money into Horizon, and that movie didn't do so well, but it came out and a lot of people are watching after the fact. So, I mean, where do you think this actually is in terms of a trend? And then you also have Yellowstone out there, right? Which I guess you could say is Western-ish. Where do you think we're at right now in the ups and downs of the Western?
So Horizon did something very interesting with the genre. it had the potential to infuse more money into the genre with its success. But like most genres, but especially the Western genre, we have this interesting dynamic where the less money it has, the more prone it is to excellence and niche and winning awards. I mean, Horizon debuted at Cannes and got its standing ovation and then went to theaters and bombed. So it's either way, it's a win-win, and it's has the Western, which was, you know, at one point in the 50s, there was a Western every 2 weeks released. So we're not at that level. We won't get back to that level, but we're still getting these like beautiful performances with A-listers, oftentimes. And I mean, look at Tarantino. Like, his favorite films are Westerns, and it shows even in his non-Western work. So the future of the Western is pretty bright by dint of the fact that even when it fails, it succeeds.
All right, Kevin, you mentioned the Wednesday Western. You review Westerns for us on a line. So out of all of them that you've been reviewing as of late, what's your favorite one? What one really stands out to you?
So that's a tricky one, because one of my favorites is obviously 1939 Stagecoach, John Ford. Once again, a Western that didn't succeed at the time, but has since become known as one of the greatest films of all time, by John Ford, a director who got 4 Oscars as best director, none of which were for Westerns. Anything with the Duke, you know, and that's what I hear from the audience, they just want as much John Wayne as possible. This week was Ballad of Cable Hogue. That was a fun one to do. I'm diving into Costner, and I mean, it's a cool series.
Can you go into just in the time we have left, because we're running out of time now? But look, the Ballad of Cable Hogue is. I mean, I'm reading this like I've never heard of this. Like, what is this? Yeah. And it's Sam Peckinpah right after he does a movie that a lot of people do know about, called The Wild Bunch. Tell us about this movie.
It's a fascinating. I mean, for those who don't know, The Wild Bunch, it's violent, it's serious, it's irreverent, it's destructive. So as the follow-up from the international success that Peckinpah, Bloody Sam Peckinpah, as he was known, because his films were so violent and his personality on set was so volatile, he followed up with this beautiful, sweet, funny little movie called The Ballad of Cable Hogue, about this unsuccessful, I don't want to call him a Job figure, but this man who's sort of struggling through the desert for water, who discovers water, and it becomes this biblical tale full of irreverence and bodiness, where everything is topsy-turvy, very much an example of good postmodern film, leading up to a movie like Pulp Fiction down the line. But definitely one that everybody should check out. Really beautiful, lovely movie that upends our expectations. Great storytelling. Highly recommend.
Kevin Ryan, I love that you're so enthusiastic about Westerns. And I want to go on record. I think that you probably have the best facial hair of anybody that has come on Blaze News tonight so far. So thanks so much for joining us.
Definitely agreeing with that. Yes. Very good.
Peterson, I loved what he said. Just the time of free America, right? Like, isn't this what we're all trying to get back to, right? We have the chaos. Everything's going on right now. Things are moving so fast in our lives. Yeah. We really just want to go back and have that open range and just live in free America.
Yeah, the deeper meaning of the Western is a theme that's deep written into the American psyche, and it's in all kinds of movies and art, and that is that there's an open place, an unregulated space, which is where savagery and civilization meet. And within each of our hearts, there's a frontier. There's a place where savagery and civilization meets. And working that out and building outside of civilization is what creates new civilization and an American way of life, hopefully worth living in the 21st century. We need to find the frontier now.
You know, I'm going to believe you more now when you talk about this stuff, because now you're not just the editor in chief, you're also an artist. Now the cat memes, right. They are the theme of the week, and it's a real story that's going on. But it's also a way that the right has been able to own a narrative, right? Sometimes they're terrible at marketing. Let's be honest.
Yeah, whether
This
it's my own Trump's art, which I will take credit for, bringing the cats to the ark or not. This is something that, look, a lot of people this week engaged in naturally on the right and really took the bull by the horns. I mean, they led the narrative and they led the media right into Springfield. And that's remarkable. And we've been talking about it all week because it's an important story that tells you everything you need to know about what's going on in this country. But we're also talking about it all week because of the memes and because of the use of imagery very quickly on the part of many people on the right.
And we were talking about election integrity today with Cortney Weil, and that is the thing that honestly is going to be the most important of anything that we could do. And we had Jack Posobiec to start the week, right? And he was talking about 8 weeks until the election. Leave it all on the line. What are you going to do? Get out there and get active, because this time everything is on the line.
Yeah, for all the talk about, what are we going to do? What are you look, you know what you need to do. You need to hold people accountable. You need to go to the people who are working on election integrity in your area, and you need to get people to vote. So Jack's message is very good. I mean, you got 8 weeks. What are you personally going to do this time? You can't let other people do it for you. And I think the big issue is election integrity, as Cortney told us. It's a very good report. You should check it out at theblaze.com. We don't know to what extent things have been cleaned up, but there certainly is evidence that things have gotten better. Republicans have gotten active. People like Cleta Mitchell, CPI, is quoted in that article, she's been on our show. She's told us we've changed hundreds of laws for the good, right? But we don't know if it's enough, and no one can say if it's enough. And so the important thing is going to be getting out there and getting your people out there and voting.
And today is September 13th. It's exactly 2 months since Donald Trump was shot in Pennsylvania. And I think it's important to note that we still aren't any closer to the answers that the American people want. And the committee that is led by Mike Johnson is pushing it off until after the election. They said they're going to be out there meeting. So if you want anything done, you're going to have to go out there and figure out a way to do it yourself.
Yeah, and to hell with that committee. We're going to have more news about that next week. Yep. We have people out there like Steve Baker looking at this right now.
Absolutely. So if you like Blaze News Tonight, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to rate and review the show. It helps everybody else to find it. Everybody, have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.